You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. Today I'm hanging out with my co-host Paige Albert and Ian Somerhalder, the actor who stole our hearts on The Vampire Diaries and now steals the spotlight in the world of bourbon and sustainability. From charming fans on screen to charming farmers into regenerative practices, Ian is on a mission to save the planet one sip and one step at a time. In this lively conversation, he spills stories about his journey and how he's mixing passion and purpose in the most unexpected ways through his bourbon, Brothers Bond. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite Brothers Bond cocktail, and enjoy the show. Ian, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you on Served Up today.
I am so grateful and so excited to be here. So thank you. It's really special to be able to sit here and talk to you after there's so many people. When I said I was doing this show, so many people in this industry listen to this show. You have a huge following out there of incredible, abled, ballers in this business. So thank you for even including me in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe in, what you're doing. You've worn so many hats as an actor, an activist, entrepreneur. Can you tell the listeners what skill or mindset has carried over from acting to now building a business?
Connection, listening, excitement. Excitement is such a huge part of any business, but when you're passionate about something, people feel that and they are along for the ride because you're inspiring them to feel better about whatever it is they're doing or giving them some sort of differentiator, which is quality and connection. And I think you could argue right now, or actually not argue, that we need quality and connection, particularly connection right now more than ever in human history.
Yeah.
And there's something very special about that. And while there are some very unique shifts and changes in this business, there are a lot of sectors that are shifting and changing. But at the end of the day, connection, bonding is everything. Because we're an animal, but we're a clans society. And so it's very special to be a part of this in this massive transition. Listen, with every transition of any sector, of any category, of any sector in business, there's always opportunity and change. And so I think we're just on this very unique precipice right now of enormous change. And we see it within the distribution models, obviously. Mm-hmm. A lot of big shifts in there. We see it in the consumer models, a lot of big shifts in there. And so at the end of the day, what we found about being in the entertainment business, Paul and I really distilled one thing, actually, but pun intended, I guess, distilled one thing, which was that you got to think about this. And actually, Paige, you could ask some of your friends because you'll see it go down, down, down in demographics. The show's been seen by over 1 billion people globally. Yeah. So if you think about it, just from that 10,000 foot view, that's 1 in 8 people in the world who've somehow seen an interface with this story. And so that story was really the most authentic thing Paul and I could have ever done. But and I study data sets, they fascinate me. But one of the things we realized was shared experience bonds people.
And that's hospitality, Ian.
Exactly right.
Hospitality. That's what that is.
It is the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. Hospitality is a form of entertainment that is connecting human beings together, whether it is by a hotel room, a music venue, a bar, a restaurant, a poolside, whatever it may be, you're curating a food and beverage program or hospitality room program for people to connect.
Yeah.
It's a form of escapism in its purest form.
Absolutely. I think it's incredible also the cult following that you guys have accumulated from the show as well. And I even follow both of you guys on Instagram and seeing the impact you guys still share with all of your fans and all of your followers, and how you share your bond with your brand as well as the impact from your show. So fans love seeing your dynamic with Paul continue into business, which is so much fun to see. So what's one thing about working with him on Brothers Bond that feels different from your TV days, and what feels exactly the same for you?
That's such a great question. And thank you for those kind words. I mean, the biggest mistake I could have ever made was leaving 8 years of television with Paul Wesley.
I hope he doesn't listen to this.
Jumping into probably, decades of being in this business together. It's actually really special. Again, these brothers, these vampire brothers, but let's be honest, like this show was like a teen vampire soap opera. It just had this enormous amount of heart. And that bond between these boys represented so much to people. And it was unbreakable, despite how many times they wanted to kill each other. The only thing that really, and we've looked, there is no case study for a brand that has this sort of level of quality and authenticity, but with 16 years of global IP built into it. These I get in so much trouble for this when I say this, but I feel, and Paul feels too, that the true love, the true bond, the true love relationship of this show was the brothers. We started in the beginning and it ended at the last scene. And so for people to be reminded that whatever the ups and downs of life is, that true, really strong bonds can carry you through a lifetime of the ups and downs. It's not always butterflies and unicorns. And so that aspect has carried over. What's amazing is, what's so different is, we actually own this. With Vincent Hanna, our co-founder and dear partner, who I've been in business with Vincent for over 10 years. We own this. Vampire Diaries was a huge, huge, huge jumping off point, and it was amazing. And we took a lot of ownership of the show. I wish we actually had physical ownership. My gosh, that would make such a difference in our lives. It's not that we didn't fight for it. We did.
Deserve it, because you have a cult-like following. She's not kidding.
I mean, it's really substantial, and it's very special for us because we get to bond with people and they get to share their bond. So we get to share our bond on a global stage, and then they get to share their bond when they're face-to-face with us or interfacing with us, or share the bond with their communities. So it's very different because we are our own bosses, Paul, Vincent, and myself. I mean, obviously we have a board and we have,
right.
And so, but we all work as a team. There's no we truly own this. We built it from the ground up. But the thing that's the same is there are a couple of big factors. Do you ever, and Paige, if you haven't, you absolutely should, even today, on Audible, or you can read it. I mean, Audible is now easier because you can just hear everything, or iPad books, or whatever you do. But there's an author named Malcolm Gladwell. You ever heard of this guy?
I have not, no.
So he wrote a number of books. He wrote one called Blink. He wrote another one called The Tipping Point. But he wrote one, and the last one's called Talking to Strangers, which I'm on for the third time. But he wrote one that was like a watershed moment for humanity, I think. It was called Outliers. And what it is a story of success. And I don't mean people who just made a shitload of money in life. I mean the people who actually changed the world forever and ever and ever. And it's interesting. There is some mathematical equations that end up being very, very, very consistent with the people who actually did the most in the world. One of them is they typically did this thing that made them who they are for either 10,000 hours or 10 years. Crazy, right? Bill Gates, programmed 10,000 hours before Microsoft popped. The Beatles played 10,000 hours before their first album popped. Like when you start breaking it down, it's kind of like a little scary how it works. But the beginning of the book starts with professional hockey players, believe it or not, because the best hockey players in history, I mean, most of them are all born between like January 1 and say, whatever, April 1 or May 1. And that was because if you were a kid, you were born in January versus a kid who was born in December, you're a lot bigger, a lot stronger. You're going to get a lot more of the attention. It's just a numbers game. And so it does actually matter where you were born and at what time, what opportunities you might have had. The biggest magnates of the 21st or 20th century were typically born, I think, between like 1861 and 1864 or something like that. Because if you, by the turn of the century, if you were born before that, you were a little older, you had a family, you weren't really able to push. If you were born after that, you were too young. But if you were right in that one pocket, you had all the energy, all the tools, all the to make yourself, whatever, a steel magnet, oil magnet, whatever it is. And so we had 8 years on television together, 172 episodes. You're talking thousands of hours of connecting, working, workflow, all of it. So we don't think twice about whether it is an interview, a session, nothing. It's all the same to us. It's like butter. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so part of our DNA. And that does a couple of things. One of them makes that authenticity so real that it's palpable. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah,
it makes sense. These guys have been together for 16 years. They are like, if I could show you the tech, I mean, Paul's texting me right now. Like, I talk to this human being like 60 times a day, every day of life, for better or for worse. But we have this shorthand where another thing it does is you move through things very quickly. I mean,
absolutely.
HR, the things that happen with just Paul and I, HR never hears about, because the thing about it is, it's like, so someone comes up with an idea, it's late, we're tired. It's like, no, Ian, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? I didn't think about that. You're right. I don't think about, there's no like hurt feelings. You're just like, roll through it. That diminishes so much time and red tape. And, we just move through things. And so it's very special to be able to run. And Vincent too. Vincent and I, we've just been through so much together and building companies and families and stuff all together that we get on a call and we get done in 1 hour, which would have taken people 2 days. So it's really special just to be able to steamroll through something. That is really special. And so for this to play out on not just farms and fields and dinner tables or boardrooms, to play out on a global level, where now, especially, Bridget, I don't know if you saw, we're just launching in global travel retail, which who knew? It used to be you built a brand on the on-premise, and we're about, our brand has exploded with the idea. I mean, you're looking at thousands of outlets. The numbers are crazy, but again,
that's exciting, and that's hard to break through. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I can tell you that's really, really hard to do. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I mean, when it's the craziest thing, because you're right. You have to have these giant $25 million budgets to go out and to do that. But we spent so many days, months, weeks, years of our lives. These gray hairs didn't come from nowhere.
I didn't either. I feel you, brother.
It was amazing, but we diminished our bodies and our souls, not our souls, but our bodies a great deal, running for this thing that was success, but building it one scene at a time.
Yeah.
One line, one scene, 1 week, one episode at a time, literally. And so it's been really special. Now when you segue into the whiskey space, now you've got an authentic story, but you damn well better have the quality. And so any brand will tell you that the success of a brand, not just, honestly, the companies of the future, like the successful ones, I don't mean ones that just make a lot of money, the ones that really are the household names that have the affinity of people, are the companies, those future companies are the ones with the triple bottom line, right? End of story. It really, there's no other because this new generation coming in, millennials, Gen Zs, eventually Gen Alphas, they won't stand for anything else. Because they want to know. And that's why Brothers Bond took off so well, because of especially millennials and Gen Z. I mean, obviously tail end of Gen Z, right? 21 up, LDA. They felt that and they wanted to be a community. And even if it was something they weren't used to trying or tasting, we made it so approachable initially that they could get into that flavor. But they created one thing from it, which was bonding, occasion. We need this as technology. And this isn't like some crazy conspiracy theory, but I'm saying naturally as it progresses, technology is actually really pulling us apart. I'm so grateful to be in an industry that brings people together.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah. I think it's so wonderful that the connection is like the biggest part of your brand and the bond that you have with people. So the story of Brothers Bond is so deeply tied with your friendship with Paul. And how do you think that your on-screen brotherhood has shaped the whole DNA of this bourbon brand?
It's a great question. Again, like we always joke, I literally, my soul is in these bottles. And so
you can tell
it's been like, it's so special. And to get this far, I mean, this is the hardest, as you know. I mean, obviously, and it sounds so strange. Had we not had the massive launch power of a literally multi-generational global show, just ultimately one of the most successful actually in history, I would never try and launch this brand. You couldn't do it. You would just need so much.
Yeah. Starting from the ground up.
Yeah. It's like, how do you even do that? To see now where you have a brand that was built from the ground up on the basis of connecting people with amazing quality and amazing story, and now giving back to planet Earth, not just for this altruistic approach. No, sound business economics. Mm-hmm. Rebuild communities, bring people together, help them make a lot of money. Boom. Like, you can change the world with that shit. Like,
no one, you're so right.
Like, no, please, you know what I mean? But it's like, no one's going to argue with you about that. Everyone has at the table at that point. And I've had the most profound conversations over a bottle of Brothers Bond in places like DC with the most powerful members of the left and the most powerful members of the right, sitting at a table, coming together over a bottle of Brothers Bond and talking about the most sound economic policies for the betterment of our nation and ultimately the world. And you're like, dude, this is how things get done. And it was always this way. People sat around the campfire. They sat around the fireplace. They sat on the porch, whether it was the TP or the boardroom. But when you're getting people together to have a conversation, you damn better well hope that everyone's perspective is seen and heard, but that there's a neutral ground. And typically, it's usually food or beverage, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when you remind people, and I say this in DC a lot, and they're like, oh, man, you're kind of right. The greatest enemies of the jungle or the African savanna will all peacefully come around the watering hole.
Yeah.
And you will see species that would otherwise hunt and kill each other in a heartbeat around the watering hole for survival.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned something, and it's like the bar back in the 1800s, the local pub, the tavern was a place where people would come together to make political decisions. Typically the sheriff ran the tavern or the bar, and it really was a place where big decisions were made for communities and for our country as well. And so it has such a history, and liquor, booze, spirits, wine is such a major part of that. I always say, approach a bottle as a historical artifact, truly, because there's a story there, right?
Yep.
If it's authentic, like how you keep, you're saying, and it has a real story, it's part of history. And so I know that you are really big into the environmental footprint. What steps have you and Paul made to be a part of that, to ensure that Brothers Bond reflects your values, in terms of sustainability?
I mean, I have some of the greatest mentors pretty much in the world at this point in the space of agriculture. Rick Clark, Gabe Brown, Alejandro Carrillo, who is like, I mean, this guy's going to single-handedly, they're going to regenerate the Chihuahuan and the Sonoran Desert, like millions of acres of like, this is going to produce so much. And then, and then a number of others. One of the things that we set out to do was to build the truly first, like truly regenerative spirits company, where you look across a portfolio of stuff where there's liquid in a bottle and it is completely regenerative. I mean, obviously the Samuels family was really incredible to the movement. They've obviously done it with makers. That whiskey is not going to be ready for 6 years. And ours has now been on shelves for, I don't even know, damn near almost 2 years, a year and a half. Mm-hmm. They led the charge, and it's fascinating to see them as a whole family and as a group do it. That's what I'm doing, is to build not a carbon neutral company, but a carbon sequestering company. And when you look at the numbers and you see like we go through a lot of grain, like at Southern Distilling too, where we make our regenerative whiskey, mm-hmm. like that distillery. So it receives about 60,000 pounds of grain a day.
That's crazy.
That's an enormous amount.
That's an enormous amount of grain.
And it comes from within 5 to 20 miles from that distillery. How amazing is that? Regeneratively grown. And so what Paul and I want to do is, I think because producers, and what's so amazing is, and Ray Archuleta, like, gosh, you got to love Ray. He, as an agronomist, one of the things he realized as he was traveling around the world, and Gabe Brown says this in the movie as well, is producers don't know how their soil works. Not movie producers, like food producers. Yeah. They don't know how soil works. And then once they realize it, and they realize what they can do with it, and the sheer economics of it, but the community building aspect of it, the weather balancing component of it, it's a no-brainer, like end of story, right? So what Paul and I want to do is build not just the first truly regenerative spirits company, but we use money that we make to help farmers transition. Like we've been giving back to regenerative agriculture since the day we started. It's built into the corporate governance of the company, this financial company. And here we were, like this little shitbox company no one had ever heard of, and we're writing 7-figure checks for regenerative agriculture. And people are like, what is this thing? And then they realize, oh, this is actually the future of the planet. And so we pride ourselves on that. And so, when you hold this bottle and you realize if everyone's so up in the arms about the amount of carbon going into the air, and yet these two things sequestered far more carbon than they produced, now we've got something. Now you've got something. And at the end of the day, whatever side of the aisle you sit on, or it doesn't matter when you look at the numbers. When you eat carbon, you sequester it through biosequestration, put it back in the ground where it belongs, you fix so many of the world's problems. And they're legit problems. They're not even issues. They are problems, right? Famine, drought, war, all this stuff. These are real problems, right, for humanity. And we're wasting all of our money fighting each other. We should be spending all this money supporting each other and growing each other. And that's not like some BS altruistic thought. This is like, no. Wait till you see the third movie. It will blow your mind, because what you're realizing is the global positive impact of regeneration is going to offset so many of the problems that we're experiencing right now. And when you look at the numbers, they're really bleak. And Paige, that is why, I can't say publicly it was completely directly attributed to us, but we got $20 billion from the government, right? The head of the USDA saw Kiss the Ground and realized, wait a minute, we have less than 60 harvests left. That's all the healthy topsoil we have left. That's a conservative estimate. What if we're wrong? Great. Maybe it's 70. Maybe it's 51. Like, this is bullshit, folks.
Yeah,
like,
terrible.
Why? My old buddy Elon can send a freaking roadster to Mars, but we can't even fix our own climate or the weather issues that we're having. So we are creating widespread drought and famine and stuff by our misuse of land. Well, think about that. That's a great problem. You know why? We can just fix it. And so that is what we want to do with Brothers Bond, is not just be a catalyst for bonding and connection, but build a multi-generational, national, multi-billion-dollar monster that always has the same feeling. Craft, but at scale. Craft, craft, craft. We're pulling from fields that are small fields. These cornfields are rolling up and down small hills in North Carolina or Western Indiana or Kentucky or, Iowa, Kansas. That is where the real meat is. And so that's what's exciting for us, is that we are actually getting to build a regenerative company on a global stage and empowering and inspiring an entire industry to do the same thing. And I got so many nasty looks from people at the Discus fireside chat years ago in New Orleans. And I sat on that stage, and you're in that room with maybe not the CEOs, but the COOs, CFOs.
You're in the room with the owners and the founders
of some of the biggest.
Yes.
Period. And I said on that stage that this industry had the great potential to do so much. They were doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those staffers and assistants and COOs and CMOs went back to their boardrooms and said, this is coming. And so that's what's been really special. When you have someone like the head of the USDA sees a film and takes it to the highest ranking Republicans and Democrats, to a president who was a Democrat, and they all agree that 20 billion is the right number to start. Well, how amazing is that? Because we're about 60 million acres converted since 2020.
Wow.
So think about this. It took the US government about 50 years for certification of about 5 million acres of organic, right? And organic was amazing. It really is. Well, it's a tough situation now because I think a lot of stuff is bought and paid for, but we all want to eat organic foods. But it took about half a century to make that happen. Well, we're at 60 million acres in 5 years.
That's incredible.
Right?
It really is incredible. I mean, it's true change in our lifetime.
Oh, for sure. Within like a half decade. So we're going to get to that 100 million acre point very, very soon. We're pretty close to it. We don't know what we don't know. So there's probably a lot more converting. But with a lot of that money, we were able to convert farmers to a much more, not just regenerative, but a much more economically sound way for them to live. Dude, think about it. Like these farmers who are the powerhouses of our rural society, a rural area that feed society as a whole, they're going to be flush with cash. And those towns are going to be flush with cash. And
yes.
And those they will pay taxes on that money. So the tax base will go up. The schools will get better. The water districts will get better. After school programs will get implemented. Like this is how you build an amazing nation. But what's cool about that is we get to do it through this and food. And if you look at the 200 million grain acres, like rough production acres in this country, and you look at about a $400 an acre savings to farmers, that's 80 billion a year when you add it up that we send to foreign companies in foreign countries. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
This is the genesis of this. This is so cool that we're not even on this precipice. Like we have jumped off the cliff and we're diving in. And once we hit that 100 million acre mark, it'll be roughly about 10% of the actual farmed land in America, and it'll never go back. It'll just never go back. There's too much money to be made.
No, yeah, there's too much money to be made that needs to be made because the farmers are the backbone of our country. I mean, period, amen. We live in a farming community. I grew up here. I mean, I'm surrounded by farms. So it's important. Your work is so important. I want to talk about the whiskey itself. First of all, I want to ask you, Ian, why whiskey? Vodka would have been so much easier for you to make because we know that whiskey takes time to make and it's a longer process, obviously. And can you kind of walk us through what your whiskey tastes like? Paige and I have both enjoyed your whiskey. I'm a fan of your whiskey. My friend Gary, our mutual friend Gary Groover, turned me on to your whiskey. But tell us about it. I want to hear about all this hard work, what you're doing. What does it produce?
Thank you, my friend. Honestly, I've sat and had some really unbelievable conversations with our dear brother, Gary Gruber, who really is a mentor of mine in this business. And by the way, to so many, because he has effectively become the most powerful beverage director in the world, which I think is probably crazy to him sometimes when he thinks about it. But whiskey is, so oddly enough, Vincent Hanna and I had a wine company. I mean, listen, I love wine. It's such a spectacular, that's what I meant to tell you. That's what Paul and I wanted to do with this is there's two words that basically rule the wine industry. And I've talked about this a great deal because it's so true, but that are never mentioned in the whiskey space. And those two words are terroir and season.
That's so true.
Everything in the wine world is terroir, where it was from.
Yeah.
And you can know where that winemaker is from, his history, all this stuff. No one knows about these producers in America. And so I want to highlight the farmer in that region. And so what's amazing is you can go back and look at where this grain was coming from, and you can see what farmer grew it. And you could go sit and talk with them and look back at their books or just Google it, and you can see what that year was like. And so what's amazing is like you can tell a difference sometimes of where corn is coming from on a certain hill or a slope, or it's special. And that the terroir of this nation is so special to the grains that are being grown. But those farmers are the rock stars of that terroir. And so that is what's so cool. And so wine is governed and ruled by those two components. And to be honest with you, like I grew up super duper poor in Louisiana. But back then in the 70s and 80s, you didn't need much. Like we had horses and motorbikes and boats. And my uncle had a shrimping company. And my brother, we shed crabs and Louisiana blue crabs in our boathouse. And, you know, we were really rich because we had everything we needed. And it wasn't until I was a model and went to New York. This is in like 94, 95. Went to New York and ordered at this fancy restaurant with all these fancy people, a dozen oysters, a dozen Louisiana oysters, and a dozen blue crabs. And it was like $100. And this is in 1994. And I realized, well, we've got 2,000 of these in our freezer. I was like, I didn't grow up poor, you know?
Yeah.
But we didn't have any money. And so that was the difference. So wine, I learned about so much because I was one of the faces, really one of the most featured years of Versace in like 1995. So I was very fortunate enough prior to Gianni, unfortunately, meeting a horrible, untimely death. I got to spend a lot of time with people like that who took me under their wing. And they called me Piccolo Bimbo. And I was like, guys, in America, Bimbo is like...
Yeah. That's something you want to be called. No.
But I learned so much because I got to spend time on all those fancy jets and yachts and farms and restaurants. At 16, 17, 18 years old, I got to spend time with the greatest winemakers and chefs in the world. And I got to go into those cellars and these private estates or on an island somewhere and, you know, on the Amalfi Coast of some cellar that's 800 years old and drinking, you know, Petrus from the 40s and understand
that's incredible
how and why those flavors come to play, where they come from, what the wind or the rain or the slope or the soil composition, what it all means. And so anyway, the long and the short of it is, well, there's a vast ocean between a great bottle of wine and one that's cheap. But in whiskey, in the 80s, when I was a kid, every dad drank the same whiskey. Whether the guy, you know, you're at a Saints tailgate or for LSU or whatever, and you've got some guy who's like a CEO of a bank, and you got my dad who's a blue collar, you know, who was a union electrician, and they're drinking the same whiskey, and they're talking like equals. And I always remember that was something that always made me feel included.
Yeah.
Like I even get emotional thinking about it, where it's just like young kid, that sense of belonging came from adults treating each other on the same playing field. And it was always such an amazing, and then, you know, obviously we had a lot of fence lines are made of residual cane, sugar cane back from when everything was planted. It's cheap and you can go miles and just makes for great, you know, fences make for good neighbors. And so after church and stuff, my dad, even when I was like little kid, 6 years old, back then I knew how to tie flies. I knew how to tie fishing lures. I knew how to do all that stuff. My cousin and I would just get a cane knife and we go chop down sugar cane, grind it in a grinder from the pre-Civil War. But the adults we would muddle it with mint. You just pick under the oak tree because it's an invasive species and it's everywhere and it's amazing. I remember muddling fresh sugar cane and mint, and the adults after church would all make mint juleps. These are foundational core memories that are rooted in not just American tradition, but in my own tradition, our family structure. And so Vincent and I, we had a wine company that was about to be actually quite successful. We had some massive orders, but we didn't want to deal with the transcontinental component or the trans world side of it, dealing with geopolitics and trade wars and tariffs and all this stuff.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And this was the first time we shut it down. We literally shut it down, and we politely said no to multi-million-dollar orders, because really what you net from that versus what you have to do. So Paul and I always wanted to start a whiskey brand, and since like season 2, but we were so young. And Vincent, being an amazing international salesman and running his own company, had access to enormous amounts of like an outlier moment where, a deal had fallen through with an unknown whiskey maker and I can't say anything legally, but basically about 250,000 cases of unbelievable whiskey, while also in barrels, young, was available. Vincent and Paul and I just said, this is that moment.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.